kind of want to use that as a canvas to almost explore your obsession and paint a picture of your obsession with toys. So what was the first toy you ever bought as a child, and what did that feel like?
I mean, I have really, really vivid memories of being like 1 year old or 1 year old and going to the toy store with my dad, picking up Star Wars figures and He-Man figures, him telling me not to tell your mum that you've just got a new toy, but I was obsessed and wanted to collect everything. And like back then we had a Betamax player, so in 1981, 2, 3, that was kind of like the height of technology. And I watched Star Wars. I must have seen A New Hope over 1,000 times. And that's kind of stayed with me forever. And it's as I've always just had a love of. I guess it transported me to a different world. And I mean, it really is a film that just blew people's minds when it came out, and it blew my mind. And I just loved the richness of the universe and all the characters and wanted to collect them all. So.
And why did that film blow your mind?
I think it's just so revolutionary. I mean, I was young, so I guess I hadn't, like adults at that time, it blew adults' minds because they'd never seen anything translated to the screen in such a way, like all the practical effects and the kind of industrial light and magic's wizardry just to bring something, another universe so close to us. And yeah, just the characters are just amazing. I mean, it's a simple story, and it's been ripped off and riffed a million times. I mean, George Lucas stole it from Japanese mythology, but it just resonated with me, and it resonated with, as you know now, there's so many fans out there of Star Wars and all the other things that have stemmed from it, like Harry Potter and things like that. Yeah, it's just. I mean, even back then, really, in a way, and up to quite recently, you were almost considered a geek if you had toys on your sort of desk or table. And now I think there's probably more people who have a Funko Pop that don't, for instance, or things like that. It's just become much more accepted now.
Yeah, it's way more in vogue, for sure. And you said it's a simple story ripped off of a Japanese...
yeah.
I didn't know that. Talk to me about that, mate.
I think I don't want to be wrong on this, but I think it's The Seventh Samurai. It's basically just a story from mythology. There's actually a movie of it as well, and it's just that story arc of good versus evil, and triumphing at the end. So yeah, and
I think it's so interesting because I had this conversation with Ollie Hiscox from Ollie's Olives the other week, or Ollie's, and what we were talking about is how there's this book I love called The Laws of Human Nature by Robert Greene, and in that book he says, we have all got this inner child that is dormant in us. It's squelched and bullied and bludgeoned out of us through the educational system, university, blah, 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 blah. And we are all trying and pining to get unlock that inner child. And if you think about it, like Lord of the Rings, people obsessed with Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter. I remember when I used to do that cheese job, I went up to fucking Watford. There's a Harry Potter world in bloody Watford, yeah.
I've been. It's impressive.
Yeah, sorry. I'm not. Yeah, there's probably a lot of Harry Potter zealots who go there on some sort of pilgrimage. And I'm like, this is actually mental. They're probably more enthused by it than the kids, but there is this kind of obsession with finding that inner child. Pixar movies, parents love watching Toy Story just as much as the kids. And it's really interesting when this comes to food and drink, because I think some of the best brands and the ones that stand out and put kind of almost pierce into your soul and unlock that inner child are your innocence. Your Tony's Chocolonely. Tony's Chocolonely is in many respects Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. It's Willy Wonka. It's got that super gorgeous packaging. I would love to know how kind of your obsession with toys has set you up for success building brands, because you've built brands like Miller Ways, obviously the and soda packaging, boom. When I saw that, I was like, that has just got me signed, sealed, delivered. Do you know what I mean? That is unreal. So yeah, I'd love you to talk to that, please.
Yeah, I guess playfulness when it comes to analog. I mean, I can't protest to design all the things analog. I'm the kind of creative director, managing director. We have a creative director and design director, but it's very much been built from the ground up. It's 16 years of me, and it's kind of manifested. It's a manifestation of me, really, like you said, the playfulness and the toys. I think a lot of it comes down to, I mean, seriousness, but also not taking yourself too seriously. Willingness to try things and experiment and be playful. And just, I think, like, my obsession with toys is manifested into a business, where we do work for Netflix, we do work for Mattel, we work on Hot Wheels, we work on Barbie, we work on Ninja Turtles. I basically cultivated my own dream job, and I would say to anybody else, what's your obsession? It doesn't have to be toys and things like that, but it's really it's honing down on that obsession and then going for it and building on that. And if you can start from a point of obsession, that's how you build a successful brand, I would say. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but
no, it does for sure. And I think it's interesting. I started. I was listening to the Rick Rubin, Joe Rogan podcasts the other night, and obviously Rick Rubin, for listeners, is the guy behind pretty much everyone: Beastie Boys, Red Hot Chili Peppers. I mean, he's just an insane legend of the music industry. And what he said is he got lucky by he focused on his obsession, thinking that he was going to have to get a proper quote-unquote job to then, almost do that as a hobby. Yeah. And he said he got very lucky and by becoming focused on his obsession first, the rest falls into place. And I think for our listeners who are starting out with a brand, it's very, very important to start with kind of what you're obsessed with first. Try and find that bit first, and then the rest will kind of fall into place. Because look, if you're growing up in Preston, mate, and you've had like a kind of an obsession with toys, well, now look at you now. You've got a brand that's in Sainsbury's and Tesco. You've got a huge kind of creative agency. Yeah,
I think a lot of that. I think probably the lesson. In all my years in business, I haven't learnt many lessons from people. I'll be brutally honest about that. I think the one thing that's always stuck me is kind of follow through with what you want to do. It's not what you do in your business all the time. It's what you do around your business that really makes a difference. So I curated a toy show back in 2010, 2011, where I got sort of 30 artists from around the world to curate to customize Bear Bricks, which is like a platform by Medicom. It's like a small. They do small ones, like sort of. They do 3 different sizes, like really big ones down to very small ones. And Nickelodeon saw that, and they put us into a folder somewhere, and they'd seen this show. And at the time I was doing that show, I'm thinking, God, like, I'm spending a lot of time doing this show, and really I probably should be doing the work that pays the bills. And the reality, they saw that, they asked us to pitch on a job, which was actually a packaging refresh for SpongeBob SquarePants. A few iterations ago. We're talking nearly 10 years ago now. We were the wild card, brought in to kind of just put the cat amongst the pigeons, see what happens, and we won that pitch. And the kind of rest is history for me. From there, we've worked with Nickelodeon since that point, and we're one of the out of New York as well. So this isn't in like the London team. This is globally, and from there, from our experience with those guys and building our portfolio and credentials, we've then managed to leverage into Netflix and Universal and MTV and Coca-Cola, and it really, that point in my life changed when I put on that show. And at the time, I didn't feel like I was doing the right thing. It felt kind of like I was neglecting my other business to do this. And I think you can say that maybe a little bit with Ann Soda as well. Ann Soda is a pure passion project. I know we'll probably come on to that in a bit, but we decided to put our money where our mouths is and just go for it and do it and commit to it. And it's been a lot of work. It's been a hell of a lot of work as well as a day job. But again, something I felt passionate about, something I truly believed in. So we just went for it. And I think so. Yeah. Sometimes it's what you do around your business, not in your business, that will make the biggest impact and difference.
It's almost looking for those ancillary opportunities, because I think that's where it's almost like the sweet spot. Like, when you get almost like a croissant, and the best bits are those crispy bits on the edge. Like that's the juicy bits. But you've got to look where no one's looking and find these kind of these opportunities, ancillary opportunities. So with Nickelodeon, you're the wild card. Why, in a couple of principles, do you think they picked you guys versus bigger brands, bigger agencies with brasher budgets?
I mean, there's a really weird connection that we'd actually. So basically, in that world, you're talking about the world of licensing. So there's a lot of brands who license IP properties. That's the sort of stuff you'll find on merchandise. It could be on T-shirts or mugs, or anywhere activations. We often create graphics that we don't know where they're going to land up. We just, for instance, like Stranger Things, we did all the Hellfire Club graphics, which just absolutely exploded and is everywhere. And really weirdly, we had actually done some like wheelie bin stickers where we'd been asked to do like wheelie bin stickers for Disney, Pixar, and Warner Brothers for a company in Leeds actually. And I never really told anybody this before, but what we got access to was all the style guides and all the packaging guides for Disney and for Warner Brothers. And we got to see behind the curtain. And when we were in Nickelodeon, they'd never done a packaging guide before. So we presented the work back to them based on what we'd seen, how Disney approaches it. So turn of fate, really. And then for Nickelodeon, that was kind of like, from that point on, that's how they did packaging guides. So, and I still work with the guy that gave us that job right now, and he's now senior vice president of consumer products. So yeah, it's just the weird timing. Like we from doing something that seemed so remedial, like wheelie bin stickers, and then all of a sudden that basically gave us the knowledge, tools and skills and ability to kind of translate that to somebody else. So again, it's doing jobs as well where, you know, at the time it might not seem the most rewarding, but you try and take the best out of everything that you're doing.
I also think it's like not following logic. Do you know what I mean? I think some of the best things never come from logic. There's a guy I'm interviewing in a couple of, in January actually, so it's a while off, but a guy called Rory Sutherland, who's kind of the head guy at Ogilvy, and he says there's this whole thing of the best ideas. Some of the best ideas are only great in retrospect. So, for example, the example they talk about is Dishoom. So Dishoom had a massive issue. It was so banging, mate.
We're going for our Christmas party actually. So we're going to the Manchester one.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually went to the Manchester one when I was visiting the Co-op a couple of weeks ago. Well,
one of the best buildings I've ever been to. I'd recommend anybody go. It's an old Masonic lodge. It is one of the nicest buildings I've ever been inside. So they do a couple of really interesting things. First thing is they purposefully started doing. No punter would go into a curry house for lunch. Yeah. The thought of going into a curry house for lunch was just bizarre and crazy. What Dishoom did is they decided to really put on breakfast. So, you know, they've got the naan wrap with like the cream cheese, the bacon, and the chili jam. Oh, delish! Yeah, amazing.
And that got punters in the morning, and then they'd stay for lunch. And so they've then increased their trade massively by serving breakfast. So again, retrospectively, it's a great idea. Obviously, it makes sense. But it's another idea that only makes sense retrospectively. Another thing they do is they write a story for each and every... They create a character for each and every restaurant, which I find really fascinating, because I think the best brands are essentially human connections. That they've got a personality. So every single restaurant has a unique story to it. So the one in Kensington was based on this guy who'd... he'd almost been a bit of a nomad and travelled the world and wanted to create this Bombay cafe, turn a rundown cinema into a cafe, and it's a brilliant example of like, well, that shouldn't make sense on paper, you shouldn't do that on an Excel spreadsheet, you know, but it's fucking genius. And it's a bit like you guys with this Nickelodeon pitch. Like on paper, you probably shouldn't have focused on that, or you should have. You know, you've kind of found these weird things that don't follow logic, and by doing that, that's then catapulted you guys forward. So I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, I think as well, we are passionate about it as well, and I think that shines through sometimes. You know, just because you've done it before doesn't mean maybe we just brought something fresh to the table as well, which is, I think, equally as important. You know, new energy. We were young. We were like, I remember getting the call. I was in Disney World with my kids in Florida, and my only child and my wife, and I remember getting a phone call saying, "Hey, do you want to pitch for Nickelodeon?" And I was like, literally jumping up and down on the sun lounger, going, "Yes." I'm in. Let's do it. So I rang the guys back in the studio back then. I think it was 3 of us at Analog back then, and we were like, we're going to pitch for Nickelodeon. And that point really changed our business. So. And
what did it feel like when you were doing that pitch? Like, talk me through that feeling, because I think lots of our listeners will be having to pitch to a big retailer or a big investor, and there's that feeling where you're kind of touching cloth is the nicest possible way of putting it. But yeah, how do you navigate that?
Well, it's a long time ago. I can probably just about recall, feelings I can maybe recall. Yeah, I just think pressure. It felt like pressure because it was the first. I think you want to impress at that. When you got that chance, you want to like really shine. You want to really impress people. And you're probably a little bit out of your depth. Most people, when they're pitching, it's because they're out of their depth. I always think it's actually something we don't do at Analog very often. I think in 15 years we've maybe pitched 3 times, and I think all of those were paid pitches. We don't actually do any pitches, which I know sometimes sounds a bit funny to people and they don't believe it, but that's actually the God's honest truth. So for that one particularly, I just remember excitement, nervousness, just wanting to absolutely knock it out of the park, and obviously we did. We pulled it off, and it worked.
So if you don't pitch, that's not following logic. You don't pitch at Analog. That's perplexing. No. Why? And then how do you get accounts like Fans, Stranger Things, Milliways, Fix 8?
Again, so basically the reason we don't pitch is I believe you don't do your best work if you're doing it just basically ad hoc for free. Really, it's all about building a relationship. When you're pitching for something, really, best work is done on a two-way street. We don't have all the answers, and it's somebody else's brand that we're working on. So we need all the information. Often you find with a pitch as well that I guess I'm talking from a design agency point of view, maybe as opposed to like a FMCG startup brand, but there's just too many reasons that somebody else could win, like, oh, their friend Tony's got an agency and he always gets to work anyway, or like there's just so many factors that come into play. Like they won't tell you the budget before you pitch. Again, if we are doing a pitch, I'm going to get paid for it, and I'm going to know the budget of the actual job, because if I'm going to spend 3 weeks putting a proposal together that I'm going to get paid maybe a couple of grand for, I'm not then going to do that if the budget's 20 grand. It just doesn't make any logical sense. So again, not letting people know the budget. I guess if you equate it to FMCG, it's like, oh, we're going to pitch to Sainsbury's, but they're not going to tell us our store, store allocation. How many stores would we be in? Is it so? How much? If you're only going to get 100 stores, how much money are you going to put behind that pitch? If you're going to get 1,000 stores, you can go all in. But if they don't tell you that, what's the point? You're less inclined to do it.
Mate, that's so fascinating. Something I haven't actually talked about on the podcast, because I think as a challenger food and drink brand, you've got to pitch as hard as you can, and you don't know whether that's going to be 50 stores, for the full range of SKUs, 2 SKUs. You don't know, but you've got to put that in. And it's really interesting how in food and drink you kind of don't have that luxury, and I suppose that's why D2C is so, not romantic, but there's, DC is just such a great, great driving force. And I remember Graze are kind of similar to what you guys, if we're going to put it through a challenger food and drink lens, is they just built D2C. They didn't pitch to retailers. They just built D2C. They built that connection with the consumers. And then I think it was one of the big guys came knocking, and they had one of the most successful launches in maybe Tesco, because they didn't have to pitch. So there are other ways. There's more than one way to skin the cat, and it doesn't have to be through grocery. So that's really, really interesting.
Well, the funny thing is as well, if you want to talk about Tesco's and Sainsbury's, we didn't pitch for them either.
Oh, go on, son, because lots of our listeners will be sitting there thinking, fuck me, he doesn't pitch for anything.
Don't get me wrong, with Soda, we've tried a lot of things, and definitely some things have not worked at all. And I think if that's what you've got to do with all these brands, with whatever you're working on, you've got to pick your battles, haven't you? You've only got a finite amount of budget. You've got to really decide if that opportunity you're going after, what's the scale of the opportunity? Is it a perfect fit for you? Like, for instance, are you going to be, for instance, if you want to be in chilled, are you going to be at the back of like a large box distribution, or are you actually going to be in a chiller? Things like that. You've got to work out. You want to go to Whole Foods. How many Whole Foods are there in the UK? How much are you going to spend on that? Because I don't know the store count, but it's not many, is it? It's not like
it's 7, but like you get
7.
more volume out of those 7 stores than 300 stores that are in the arse end of nowhere. Do you know what I mean? So I think store numbers are great for your ego, but I mean, what's in the bank at the end of the day? Do you know what I mean?
No, totally. But again, I guess it's that size opportunity. Whereas people go, I got a Whole Foods account in America, and I've now got like X thousand stores and things like that. So again, it's just picking your battles, I would say, knowing where to go. So again, if I put it back to doing a toy show, at that time I invested a lot of money, a lot of time that I thought was You know, I thought it was very much for personal gain, but the reality was it was actually a game for analog, and Ansoda's done exactly the same. If I look at the amount of time and effort and energy and money I've invested into Ansoda, what it's brought back to analog has been equal to, or if not greater than, the amount invested, because it's opened us up to so many new clients and so many new opportunities. Pitching to Tesco and Sainsbury's, getting back on track. What happened with Ansoda is we created a visual. We put a picture on the internet of a can of vodka and soda, and people just went absolutely batshit crazy for it. And Tesco's are saying, like, this was before hard seltzers were a thing, and I don't really class ourselves as a hard seltzer because we're vodka, and we actually named the spirit, which hard seltzers is fermented. Is fermented sugar beets. That's what it's meant to be anyway. And they just saw it and they wanted it. And the God's honest truth is we weren't ready. We weren't ready for somebody like a Tesco's. We were so in our infancy. And then Sainsbury's happened in a very similar way. They just said, we're doing a range review. Can you send in some samples? And then that was it. We got listed.
But it's very interesting because that sounds super easy. And there's a great story about, and I may butcher this, but there's a great story of, I think it's Picasso, and you probably know this better than me. If you're in the, all right. So this story goes, Picasso is sat in a cafe, probably having a schnaut and a coffee or whatever. Yeah. And this guy comes up to me and goes, "Oh, can you draw me something on a piece of paper?" And Picasso does 3 seconds, draws like whatever, I don't know what it was, right? And then Picasso goes to the guy and goes, "That would be 15 grand, please." Okay. And the guy was like, well, hang on a sec. That only took you 30 seconds to draw that. I'm not paying you 15 grand. And Picasso goes, No. That took me 30 years of 10,000 hours of graft. And people may only see the ice cap of Ansoda, whereby they'll see, oh, you didn't have to pitch for Sainsbury's or Waitrose, but this goes all the way back to your obsession with toys, your obsession with design, lots of pitches that didn't work at Analog, to then get to a point where the branding looks so gorgeous that it just stands out. As I said, it's like drinking a rave. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. It's unreal. So it's really interesting that.
I think, we work a lot in spirits. That's why we did Ansoda. It wasn't just like a whim. It was like we actually work. So our two areas of specialty is basically, the way I define it to people, is cocktails and toys. That's where, before we were doing the sort of work with Nickelodeon, we worked on a lot of bar and restaurant concepts, interiors, menu design, branding, and we'd work on spirit brands as well. So, and actually I have another spirit brand, Kokoro, which is Japanese inspired gin. So we weren't like fresh out of the gate with this. It's kind of like it fits in our wheelhouse. It's like it fits with our journey, and it's a right thing to do. If that had been sort of like a cosmetic brand or anything else, I would have just gone, no, I'm not doing it. And just it was like a natural thing for us to do it in a weird way. It was kind of, well, if we were going to do something, it would be a spirit or something in the alcohol sector, just because it makes sense. And I think the branding just came. It was just one of those. It was such a quick thing. It was just like, I think I said the words Ansoda, and then Mike, our creative director, just designed it, and that was it. It was finished. It was just done. There wasn't a lot of agonising over it. I'd love to tell you there's like days and weeks and like backwards and forwards, and it just wasn't. We just kind of did it, and he's an amazing FMCG designer, and me and him think like we're basically totally in tune with each other. If I say something, I know what I'm going to get back, and vice versa. And that was it. It was done and designed, and we stuck it on Instagram, and then all of a sudden it was just like people seemed really excited about it, which was an amazing feeling.
Yeah, no, because I remember obviously our friend Jess, she's brilliant, and she was working with you there, and I think I remember when I saw it, it was just so vivid and just delicious. Now, where I want to go back to is as we said, is this kind of this childhood piece, and this how this kind of shaped your obsession with toys. And sorry if this is a bit deep, I just think it really adds a bit of depth and colour to this conversation. So what was your childhood like, and how did that ignite like a ferocious fire in your belly to just have this tenacious drive to, whether it's with Analog or Ansoda? What was that like? Yeah,
I think I've given it, it's interesting to talk about, and I've given it a lot of thought, and like my mum and dad separated when I was really early, so I don't see them as the driving force behind what I did. But in the flip side, maybe it was because I had that insecurity of that unknown, having to do things myself from a very young age. Like always, my mum was always supportive of me, but they never drove me to do anything. They never actually drove me to do anything. I remember as a kid drawing a lot, really like just drifting away and drawing. And even today, I wouldn't class myself as very good at that. I think what I am actually better at is being commercially minded. And from a really young age, my dad used to take me to the build, he owned a plastering firm, so I used to go on jobs with him from like probably 1, 2, 3, 4 before they separated. And I used to go and like boss people around on the building site. And at the end of the week, as my wages, I'd get to go to the toy shop and pick out something that I wanted, which has worked out great for me. But I think not knowingly, that obviously must have made a big impact on who I am now. That idea of work ethic and having to just go out and do things for yourself. And I was always a bit like I never really cared about what other people thought about me. I never really had any kind of radar on like trying to fit in or conform to things, and I've definitely followed that all the way through. Social media drives me insane. I don't mind putting the odd thing up and now again, but it's just all the commenting and the interactions. I just enjoy like living in the moment and being there rather than commenting on it and worrying about how many likes it gets or how many. I just really don't care. And I guess in one respect that could be bad as well, because you've got to kind of play the game a bit with social media and promote things and do this and that. But it's I just never really strove for other people's affirmation of myself, if that makes sense. And I guess the creativity thing, becoming a graphic designer, I remember the point where I kind of decided that that's what I was going to do. One of my friends said, I'm going to do graphic design at college, and I went, what's that? I wasn't really, I was always loved brands and always kind of aware of design. And I just did that from 16 to 18, and then I did a degree, finished at 21, which is pretty much the youngest you could do. Got a job for a year, got made redundant, and then I was out on my own. I was kind of like there on my own trying to find my way. So I can't really pinpoint a crazy point in my childhood. I guess it's just having to go out and do it for yourself. I think that's the main thing, and I've always just done that. I've always just been on my own path and just made sure anything I've ever wanted to do, I've just jumped into it with 2 feet. So I used to DJ. I went to a club once. So I was like, right, that is it. That guy up there, I'm going to be that guy. So that's what I did. I got a pair of decks, learned to DJ, and I used to have residencies and play all over the place. And I wanted a design agency, or for toys, I used to have my own online toy store, and I still have a toy convention now that I do once a year in London with 2 friends and things like that. Everything I've always wanted to do, just jump in with 2 feet and just do it. My biggest thing is like, I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, so am I going to do something today that makes an impact? That's basically how I try and live every day, and just make sure I do at least something that makes a difference. So
yeah, no, mate, it's so good. And I think I want to get onto the DJing stuff. I think we've both got I've got a weird obsession with techno, and we'll talk about that shortly. But what you've said there about forging and finding your own path. Lots of our listeners may be just starting out, or they may be a bit further along the line. And I would love to talk about kind of. I think outside looking in, there's this romanticism of, oh my god, they've achieved so much. You know what I mean? They've achieved. You've got all these brands you're working with. You've got an Anne Soda who've gone into Sainsbury's and Tesco, and you've got kids. Everything outside looking in looks brilliant. I'd love to know kind of what are some of the darker days, even though you've gone out and done all this stuff yourself. Like, what are some of the darker days you've had to navigate, and how do you navigate those days?
It's an interesting question, and I feel really fortunate. I don't really feel like I've had that many bad days. I mentioned before getting made redundant. I think that was a dark day when it happened. It being only like 22, I'd moved to Leeds and not knowing a single person when I moved there. I just heard it was cool and like had a good nightlife. So I just moved here and didn't know anybody. And after like a year and a half of work, getting made redundant was like, wow, okay, right. Just the company wasn't doing that well, and first in, last out sort of scenario. But on the flip side, again, that's like the best day of my life ever, because without that, I pretty much wouldn't be on the trajectory I am on now. You know, I just wouldn't be. I would, you know, it might have come later, it might have come differently, but you know, everything happens for a reason, I think. So you just gotta like suck it up, move on. Just like don't dwell on stuff. I mean, another big philosophy of mine is just, I don't get bothered by things I can't control myself. Like, you know, some people will shout at the drivers as they're driving down the road, like shout at them and get aggravated by things like that. And I just think, I can't control that. I can't do anything about that. So like, let's not get worried about it. Like, what can I do right here, right now to make a difference, to affect things, to make it better? So I think about dark days, and I've been fortunate, but I'm also sensible. I'd say that I don't risk a lot. I don't gamble a lot in terms of like, I guess I'm quite controlled in what I do. So, and I'm also really good at thinking like maybe 3, 4 steps, 5 steps ahead. So I can already see things coming 2 months, 3 months down the line, and I've already kind of mentally prepared myself for it. If that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, where does that prudence come from? That ability to look into the future?
I mean, you can't do it on everything. But I think it's just common sense with a lot of things. I think most things, like I mentioned before, I've had people who've advised me in business, like you know, you get what do they call them, like non-exec directors, or you go on this course, you go on that course, and I don't really feel like I've come across so many nuggets of wisdom, other than it's a lot of it is just common sense and belief in yourself to do these things. And then the hindsight thing comes from just, you know, being aware of like what's happening in the news, what's happening day to day. Like you can read people, being able to read people, like look around the room, look at all the guys that work at analog. I could see if somebody's having a down day. I could see if somebody's maybe might be something wrong, or somebody on the flip side, somebody's having a great time, you know, or a great day. I think it's being able to read people, being able to and being self-aware, I'd say.
And how do you read people? Because lots of our listeners will be managing teams, and I think the more sensitivity and emotional intelligence you've got, the better you are as a leader. Happier team, bigger business, happier business. How do you do that? What's the Barry way of doing that?
Well, I think there's also a scale thing there. I'm quite fortunate. I've also consciously made them, like, we're 13 people at Analog, and we just moved studios about 2 weeks ago, and we've put 4 more desks in, so we might grow to 60.
Unreal, by the way.
Thank you very much. It's still a work in progress, but I put 3 more desks in, even though we've scaled the office by 3 times. Actually, what I've done is put a lot more space in for the people to break out and be happy. Like, we put a pool table in, and a foosball table, and a custom fully wrapped arcade graphics with all graphics that one of my illustrators has done, and a coffee bar and everything else, which I know it sometimes gets like wanky-fied on like Instagram, and like, you know, you need the culture underneath it before you put all these stuff in. But, you know, we say we are playful as an agency, and I think, you know, that's the sort of stuff you have to do. You've got to live your brand values, and I think it's one that we own, so I'm more than happy to do it. And I guess I'm maybe doing it by restricting the scale as well. Like, I know for a fact I don't want to go above 15 to 16 people, because I can have a personal connection with them. I don't need managers to manage the managers. I can have a personal connection with everybody, and I think it's that. I think it's making sure you have taken the time to spend time with everybody and get to know them, rather than I couldn't see myself. I had 100 employees. I don't know what type of barrier I would be in that scenario, but I've got a scenario where it works for me. Does that make sense?
Mate, I love that, because there's this whole thing of you need to build a brand that it gets so big that you need to like sell it on, and it raises shitloads of money. We talk about raising all this money, getting all this distribution, building this huge brand that is like the next Coca-Cola. Like, people revere and eulogize that. Like, people are like, you need to be doing that. I disagree. I think you got to do what you want to do. Because a lot of people said to me once I left Manulife, "Are you going to set up your own food brand?" I was like, "No, not right now. I don't want to do that." Like, the thought of having to go,
you need some deep pockets.
1, deep pockets. 2, like, I'm happy doing this podcast for the time being. 3, like, I'd rather be in Lisbon versus in fucking some factory in the arse end of nowhere with a hairnet on, to be honest, right now.
Yeah.
That's what I want to do. But I think there's, and it's about this whole thing of you saying, is, you know, having 14 or 13 people in the team. You don't have to have these huge businesses just because people are telling you on social media that you need to be a founder that exits at billions or whatever it is, or be the next Airbnb. You don't have to. You got to do what you want to do. And I think for our listeners, you can create. There's nothing wrong with creating a lifestyle business that you love doing every day, that you're excited to, because the flip side of that is the amount of these brands that are built, but the amount of burnout and toil and stress and sacrifice that goes into it is just, that to me, like, I'm here to be, happy and have a good time. And I'd love, kind of back to that, reading people. I think what I've been learning, I've been rereading this Laws of Human Nature book, and I think it's much easier to do with a smaller team, is non-verbal cues. So people will tell you how you're feeling, not by what they say, but by all their verbal language. Totally. And when you're a 100 employee company, you can't keep tabs on that. You literally physically can't keep tabs on that. But as a much smaller company, it's much easier to do that.
Definitely.
And say someone is having a lower day, like, what is the toolkit you use? Or not toolkit, that sounds so fucking, ignore that. But like, how do you help them get back on track?
I think, obviously, sometimes you just got to give people space. People are having a bad day, just leave them to it. And if it becomes more of a 2-day thing or a 3-day thing, then that's sometimes maybe when you need to step in and like have a conversation, make sure they're okay. But yeah, often it's just giving people time. Like, everybody has stuff going on outside of work, and everybody has their own issues, positive, negative, whatever they are. They might be getting married, or they might be stressed about that, or they might actually be getting divorced. There's both ends of the spectrum. So I think it's understanding. It's giving people space to just be in their own environment and still be able to do their work. And then it's just conversation. I can't really say I've got some sort of weird tools or anything else to do it. It's just being there for people, just saying like, hey, you don't look, I could tell there's something not quite right. Do you want to chat about it? Do you need any help? What can I do to be there for you? And as somebody who employs, even if you employ one person, you are their boss, but you're also everything else. You're their mum and dad, and you're the care worker and everything else. So it's a commitment to people. When you hire somebody to work for you in your business, you've made a commitment to them to look after them.
Yes, interesting. Where I want to go now, and I began asking this question to most guests. It's a podcast about challenger brands. What would you say in one sentence is a brand?
That's a good question. You did ask me this, and I've been thinking about it. I think for me, people personify brands by like their logo mark, like that. So the people call a brand like the logo, the brand. But for me, the brand is the collection of people behind that word mark or logo that make it function. Like that is the heart of the brand. It's the people that are in it and what they believe and stand for. That is the brand. Without that, like you say, it's just a faceless mark or a product and things. So I think it's people for me.
Yeah, it's because I'm trying to connect the dots from different guests. So, my whole thing is a brand's a personality and a human connection. So that brand, that thing you get on shelf, as you say, behind that is the people, which is really fascinating and nuanced to what I'm thinking. And I interviewed Ellie Webb from Caleno Drinks. Here's a bottle, actually. Do you know these guys? Sick.
Yeah, I do know that.
Yeah, really cool.
Nice stuff.
And yeah, Eddie said it's an entity, and I think this people behind it is so true. And I'd love to know, what were some of the brands that you really kind of looked up to when you were growing up? Like, what's some of the brands that made you think, cool, I can do something like this?
I don't know if something like this. I mean, the biggest probably. I mean, I was basketball obsessed as a kid, so NBA, Michael Jordan, Nike, anything Nike. I was just like, I wanted to live in America. I wanted to be American. I think so. And that's still stuck with me now. If I go to America, I'd usually go and watch a basketball game when I'm over there. I think out of everything, that's the one, like Jordan brand. We haven't worked for Jordan brand yet, but we are doing some sort of self-initiated stuff that will hopefully like catch people's attention over there. So I'd say, I know it's a weird one. It really goes back to Nike because it's the obvious one, but for me, it really was like I would like beg, steal, and borrow to get a pair of Air Jordans on my feet. And again, that stuck with me as well, like collecting. So I collect trainers, I collect vinyl, I collect toys. lately Pokemon cards with the kids. I'm just obsessed with collecting. So I think trying to think of other brands that had that much impact on me. I guess maybe music ones as well. Like obviously music, like there's so many, like as you're growing up, there's just so many moments in music that you connect back to. Like I guess less, and it's not really brands. I'm trying to think of other ones off the top of my head.
We're going to get to the music stuff, so I 100% want to talk about that. But it's really interesting about what you said about Jordan and Nike, and almost it links back to this not pitching thing. I listened to a podcast with the Nike creative director, and he was saying with the Air Force One, and I've literally got about 15 pairs of Air Force One. Like it's the only train. I've got such fat little Frodo feet that they just fit me perfectly, son. Yeah. And they've never ever advertised Air Force Ones. They never had to. Yeah. And it's the definition of genius. It goes back to the sort of sometimes playing hard to get. And
sorry to interrupt. I'm just saying that shoe's just incredible. Like people will go into like you get rappers in America that go into like a sneaker store and they'll just buy out every pair of Air Force Ones, so they've got a fresh pair to put on and play in that night, and then they just put a fresh pair on the next night as well. So it's just such an iconic shoe. I'm an Air Max 1 guy. I pretty much only ever wear Air Max 1s. So
yeah, what would you say what's your favourite pair of trotters that you've got?
My favourite pair that I own. I mean, I had a lot of Jordans and I actually sold them during lockdown. I had about 70 pairs, and my wife wanted to put an ensuite bathroom in, so they actually...
Fucking hell, mate! I didn't realise it was that many shoes.
Oh yeah, they were all unworn. They were all. I used to buy one to rock, one to stock, so I'd have one to wear and then one to put away. And I sold them all during lockdown when the boom happened with the Last Dance documentary, and everybody was just clambering for Jordans. You couldn't get them anywhere. And then since then, I've actually probably sneakily bought maybe like 30 pairs back, but not Jordans. Like I've just replaced them with stuff that I wear. And I'm trying to think. I know actually what it's Air Max 1 Atmos, which was an old shoe. They re-released it Nike about 5 or 6 years ago, and you had to vote for which shoe would get picked. I think they had like 6 or 7 people like suggest shoes, and I voted for that one, and I got an email like literally about a year later on Air Max Day saying because you voted for it, you get a chance to buy one. So I got a pair at like retail like 120 instead of like. I mean, that shoe's like £1,000 now or something like that. So I bring them out very rarely, but that's probably so. It's like a grey with a teal and then elephant print on the kind of. It's white, black, and elephant print with a teal swoosh. They are fire.
Yeah. I love. So I think there's this. There's something to link there with challenger brands, right? Because some of the best brands, and it's this. The marketing isn't always what the product looks like at home, not just on shelf. Like you've got 3 seconds to get picked up off on shelf. Yeah. Of course, that's one facet. But the other thing is, what does that brand make shoppers feel like at home? And there's a feeling about that, and I think, what you did with, so for example, with the shoes, you're never even going to wear a pair of these Jordans. Sometimes you're going to rock them or stock them, but it's going to by stocking them, they're going to make you feel something. And there's something with these brands, and there's something about. Brands, how they make people feel at home. And I talked about this before on the podcast about Beavertown Brewery. Beavertown actively encourage people to nick their pint glasses from the boozers, right? I've actually seen it on Instagram. Why? Because they want people to be thinking about Beavertown all day, every day, and subconsciously like treacle into their subconscious. And I think it's really interesting how some of the best brands like your Nikes, food and drink brands can take lessons from that. Do you know what I mean? Because it seems, again, back to this not following logic, why would people buy trainers that are just going to sit there? But thousands of people do that. Do you know what I mean?
I think people do that with spirits as well. I mean, gin's a great example. Like having a gin brand, you go to these shows and people just love to collect them as well. I think alcohol's another brand that just works in the same way. People like to have such a vast collection. It's another way of representing yourself, isn't it? Like there's so few things nowadays. Like nobody buys CDs, nobody buys music anymore. Like nobody has like 12-inch collections on the shelves. Nobody buys books. Everybody has a Kindle. So again, like having things that you could put on a shelf and kind of like tell people this is who I am, this is me as a person. Like some people seem to do that with alcohol or shoes. And I guess if you can become one of those brands that fits into one of those categories and people just want to have it and own it, I think that's a great space to be in.
with and soda then. So, what were some of the hardest unforeseen challenges? So, it seemed pretty straightforward. You post a picture on Instagram, bish bash bosh, Tesco come knocking, you get the distribution, Jess comes on board, the hard seltzer wave is, frothing, and brands are kind of beginning to get their surfboard out and jump on that. Yeah. What were some of the hardest challenges that you didn't expect going into grocery?
I think, we launched pretty much at the start of COVID, so I think definitely at that time, everything had slowed down. Like, literally trying to get product made, there's no CO2, there's no cans, there's no, so you've got this listing, and then you kind of, literally backs to the wall trying to get this product made, because all of a sudden they've seen it and they want it in 3 weeks. So I think timing for us, and timing for all brands, I feel really bad for some of the brands that companies and brands and bars and restaurants and people out there who've, the last few years have been rough. So I think that's one. And then you've already mentioned it a few times, the hard seltzer thing. And like I say, I don't categorize ourselves as a hard seltzer, but all of a sudden, because America, like you say, was a goal game, everybody's getting giddy and excited. But people forget that America's 50, I don't even know the number, 100, 150 times bigger than UK, 10,000 times bigger than the UK. I can't remember what the number is, but, so over there, you need 0.3% of the population, and all of a sudden you've got a humongous craze, and you bring it over to England, which is minute, you probably need 10, 15, 20% of the population to kind of be buying you, to make you a household name. And I think everybody went crazy for hard seltzers, and we kind of, like you just mentioned, we kind of went in with them. But when we were creating it, that wasn't even a thing. I didn't even know about hard seltzers. It wasn't something we were trying to, it was just my love of sparkling drinks and spirits. I don't drink beer, I don't drink wine. And it was just just something super clean, can drink in a can again. I didn't, you rock up at a party with a bottle of vodka and you start pouring quad vods and you're smashed within minutes, or very quickly and things like that. And you also look like a bit of a maniac when you go around to just maybe it's a little family gathering and you sort of, you pull out your bottle of vodka and stick it on the table, and when everybody else is sipping a glass of wine or a beer. So it was just that cleanness.
They'll be like, he's had a tough day. Barry at the end of the table's had a tough day. Fuck me.
Yeah. And you can soon go west when you're pouring drinks. It can easily happen. So yeah, it was just a pure born out of passion. And yeah, I think speed. I guess just speed of being in a retailer that soon is everybody's dream. But you also have to be ready for it. You have to be ready to be in that retailer. And like you mentioned before, building your presence online. I mean, that's another tricky thing. Shipping alcohol and liquid in the post is not easy. That's not easy. That is a challenge. Well, just because most places won't take up liquid, they don't want to ship liquid, and then you've got the restrictions of alcohol as well, who you're sending it to. Is this person over 18? There's just so many things. Like you mentioned, Graze. Graze is a great product to send through the post. It's the right shape. It fits through a letterbox. Bonus. It's cheap to post. Alcohol is heavy.
So I never knew that. What? So is there quite a lot of barriers with D2C and booze?
Oh, I mean, yeah. So basically, I have to get my house is now a licensed premises. My house, I have to get a license on my house to be able to sell alcohol, and a personal spirit license to be able to sell alcohol. It's a nightmare.
Oh, I didn't know that. So for any booze brands listening, what are the sequential steps they should be taking to soften that throbbing headache?
I mean, there's different ways you can do it, isn't it? You can either go through a distributor and they've got the license, but obviously then you're losing a cut. And then I think because Amazon, you have to have alcohol license. The brand has to have an alcohol license. So it used to be registered at my accountant's address just for ease of so it wasn't. But I had to register the business at my address, then get a premises license and a personal alcohol license to be able to sell on Amazon. And I think I was early on when this was happening. I think now the kind of licensing people have just said no nowadays. We're not going to give you a license, sort of thing. It's a bit nonsense. It is a bit of a nonsensical thing because Amazon are sending the alcohol out, but they don't want any responsibility if a 16-year-old orders it. So the liability it's meant to sit with the person who owns the brand, which is a bit weird if you're fulfilled by Amazon. But yeah, there's a lot of loopholes. There's a lot to jump through selling alcohol. It's just heavy trying to send stuff, and obviously shipping rates have gone up, and everything else. So yeah, it's an interesting. I think when if you D2C, having a brand that actually fits through the letterbox and is cheap to post, like if I was going to do another brand, I would literally find something that's got amazing margins and fits through a letterbox. I'm not joking.
That's Harry Razors. Harry's Razors absolutely smashed it.
Yeah,
high margin.
We work for a company in America that make false nails, and they're absolutely killing it. I was like, I'm just going to start a false nails company, really cheap to produce, like pennies. Markup on it's amazing, fits through the letterbox, light as anything, so easy to cheap to ship. So if I do another one, I'm going to think about it totally reverse engineered. I'm not going to do. I'm going to do it literally the other way around. Like, what is the margins?
So you're not going to follow your obsessions.
Yeah. No, I'll probably flip that one on my head. But like I said, if I ever do it again, I'm actually at a point where I've kind of scratched every itch I've got to scratch. I don't have any itches left to scratch, and in fact, I'm actually going to probably double down on analog, seeing as it's going well. It's going well, and also again, I haven't scratched the surface of it. We don't pitch, like I said to you before. We don't pitch, and we actually most days we're like, oh. Yeah, we could, just trying to fit the work in and get it done to the standard that we want to do it. That's the challenge rather than finding the work for us. So,
where I want to, because what you raised there is a really salient point that we don't talk about enough in our industry. And I was having a conversation with my mate James, who works at the Copy Club, and we were talking about these ideas, and I wrote a piece about this actually, about these sort of Tinseltown ideas that kind of come over from the States and then land in the UK, and it's like hard kombucha or I don't know, there's a whole bevy of different ideas that absolutely smash it in the States, but as you say, you get one state in America, i.e. California, it's still 3 times bigger than the UK.
Yep.
And it's like if you go and I think for our listeners sometimes asking, will this, almost having an NPD meeting, not in London, but going to have that NPD meeting in, I don't mean this in a disparaging way, I mean it in a pragmatic way, but go and sit in, Hull or Rotherham or these places where, or down south in Plymouth, like you've got to ask yourself, are these people going to understand what hard kombucha is, realistically? Because that's the battle you're up against as a brand in the UK. And I just think it's really interesting what you've said there about this whole hard seltzer movement and how so many brands jumped on that bandwagon. What do you think the future of hard seltzer looks like?
I think it's definitely got a place. I think we're just too early. I think honest, like mass adoption is. I think there's still people are always going to want to drink better. Like with ourselves, declaring what actual spirit is in that can. I just think I think it's just going to take a bit more time. And I mean, and then there's one other observation as well. Like in England, people like sweet shit. They like to eat sweet things. If you walk around Morrison's or Tesco's and you look what's in people's trolleys, which I love to do, there's generally a lot of sweet stuff in there, and people love cider and they love chocolate and things like that. So. Like for us, like our next iteration, if we go down that road, it'll be like a juicier version of Ann Soda, so still keeping low calorie, but we'll have some juice in it. So we'll keep our core range, but we'll also just bring in a little bit more sweetness to it. So I think it's understanding as well, like you said, is it going to work in America? But what's the English version of that product as well? Do you know what I mean? Like, what is the perfect fit for England?
Yeah, it's really interesting because it's. Yeah, product market fit. Product market fit, yes, something may work in the States, and we're very close culturally, and we have very similar things that we're obsessed with. But actually, when it comes to food and drink, there are quite a few nuances to be wary of. Do you know what I mean? And it's like just because there's product market fit in the States doesn't mean there's product market fit over here.
Yeah, I think it's definitely got a future though. I just think obviously there's going to be some winners and some losers, and again, a lot of that comes down to how deep are your pockets and how much you're willing to spend.
Yeah, like White Claw are kind of clawing their way to the top, aren't they? In that space. Yeah,
but they said they I saw their sales figures of last year. But how much did they spend? Like, is that if you've got X amount of billion in the bank, then you can spend, a few million over here and generate £500,000 worth of sales and be number one. But you've spent 4 or 5 times the amount of return to do that. So again, it's all just it's the same thing like you touched on before, like borrowing money and investing. I always think a lot of the time I see it, and You borrow once to borrow again, to borrow again, to borrow again. Where does it stop? Like, where is the actual money in the bank coming in?
And you never wanted to do that with Unsoda?
We've raised. We did an initial raise. So we did have an initial raise, but yeah, I guess it comes down to my principles as well. Like I've always just put my money where my mouth is and wanted to do it myself, and I probably feel less comfortable outside of my comfort zone borrowing X amount of money and then borrowing again and then borrowing again and then borrowing again. I think it's just it's less in my nature, shall we say.
I want to now discuss DJing and actually almost use that as a kind of launch pad to discuss the Hungry rebrand. Sorry, can't say my R's and W's. Rebrand, a Hungry rebrand. Sorry, mate. And because you've done a brilliant job, Jamie's been terrific, and I kind of want to explore that. But I'd love to know what's been the best rave you've DJ'd at.
I mean, probably the most nameable one, which was just
not nameable, not just the best one that you've been to. Yeah.
Oh, that I've actually played at. I can't really remember. Probably one of the New Year's parties that I played at in Blackpool. I used to have a residency in Blackpool and Carlisle, so and then I did get to like the best one I did. I got to play at one of the tents in Glastonbury, just like one of the sort of side tents. It wasn't one of the massive ones, but I still get to have the moniker that I got to DJ at Glastonbury. So one of my friends arranged it for me, and it was like I think it was the Red Bull tent. But it was still mint though, getting to play at Glastonbury, and. But yeah, again, it was always a passion rather than. I remember going to the first club now, where I mentioned before, I saw someone DJ, and it just absolutely like blew my mind of like how somebody could play a box of records and control a crowd. Just, I was like, wow. So yeah, that just started me off on the whole thing. I was like, wow, I'm definitely going to do that. So. And
what sort of music were you playing?
House. I mean, back then, because the era I was in, it was very much prog and tech and trance and house music. That's what was played in the club. So that's what I played. You know, I used to go to Cream. I used to like DJ on a Friday, go to Cream on a Saturday, DJ on a Sunday, then go record store shopping on Monday morning in Manchester and find like all the tracks that I heard out over the weekend and things like that. I just used to love it, and I think that's my passion stopped for it when everybody switched to CDJs and stuff, and like there's no fun like the hunt again. I guess it's the collectability side of it again, like hearing a record and being able to hunt that record down and then being able to play it to somebody else, and they're like, what the fuck is this? Like just blowing people's mind. Nowadays everybody has access to everything, so unless you're producing and making your own stuff, it's just go on Beatport, download a set, and then just tell your CDJs to mix it for you.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, mate. We went to this bar in Lisbon, and it was just everyone was playing on like actual vinyl. Yeah. And it was one of the best. It was a small little boutique bar / club thing. I think Acapella is the name of it. Unbelievable. And what I loved about it is no one in the crowd was on their phones. Yeah. Brilliant. I was like, this is mental. Like everyone was just there in the moment listening to the music. And I've talked about this before about how I think lots of brands need to think like bands or DJs. So, you know, any DJ can get access to the same equipment. Any brand can get access to the same ingredients. Any band could get access to the same guitars and drums. But it's the way you play those and the way your unique, authentic voice and your connection. Like, doesn't mean someone can play like I love Marco Carola and Jamie Jones. They're two of my favourite DJs. Absolutely love those guys. Or the Beatles. And I think, you know, when you're a DJ, it's about listening to the crowd, creating that connection, and almost going back on that. And I think it's really interesting. How do you think, you know, DJing and reading the room, reading the crowd, has set you up for success, managing and leading at Analog?
It's an interesting question. I've never actually made a connection between the two. I think. I'm just trying to think on that.
So I think
for me, one of the things for me, which I tell all my staff, is like, I believe like people should work hard and play hard. You know, I'm fully for that. Like, I want people to go out, like, you know, have a release as well. Like, I think so. I guess you've got a yin and yang there. I used to be able to work 2 to 3 days a week. When I first started out, I got a job working for a guy that owned some shops, and I was doing all their packaging for them, which 2 to 3 days a week. And then on the flip side, I was designing sleeves for people like Ralph Lawson and for 2020 Vision Records, and I was doing club flyers, and I was designing clothing labels. And so what it meant was I had the kind of daytime, and I also had free time for the nighttime. And I think it's that. I think you make the connections in the club. You make the connections when you're the last person at the bar. I think so. That kind of like bringing that. So like my job is to bring the pipeline of work to analog. That's what I'm responsible for now, as well as, you know, top line, making sure the creative output's great. But, you know, I have people to do that now. My job is to bring people in. So what I learned from that was how to interact with people, how to have fun with them, how to have a good time. You know, that's equally important. And I think so many people, like, I was out actually on Saturday night, and I could see like young people just sat at the table, like on their phones, like, and me and my wife were dancing. We got a night off for like, not been out in like probably, I don't know, a year with having 2 kids and stuff, and we were dancing there. Cause I almost like looked over and saw the look at us going like, what are those like old people doing over there? Like, it was great to just have a good time. And I think probably that's what I take away from it the most, is just being able to, you know, people buy people, and people want to have a good time. It's as simple as that. You know, it's you know, and being able to have that skill, and I think that's massively important. Like you said about, we've got all these clients and stuff. They don't come from nowhere. They don't come from just out of the blue. You know, it's a relationship. Everything's a relationship. Like whether it's a buyer in a supermarket, whether it's whoever it's a supplier, whoever they're all relationships. Every every connection in our life is relationships, and I guess that's maybe what I took from the music, the connection you make with people.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Like, I've got a mate, and I know everyone says this, I've got a mate who's a DJ, yeah, mate. But I've actually got a mate who is a DJ, and he's doing bloody well, and he plays in Ibiza all the time, and what he did is he actually set up a club night. And this is when I went to Bournemouth, and by setting up a club night, he paid the DJs to come down, but what he was really doing was building connection and relationship with them. So he suddenly gets all these good DJs in. You know, fast forward, it's now 10 years. He's now playing in like Costa Rica, all this stuff. It's unreal. Yeah, but it goes back to what you were saying, that first principle of people buy from people.
So yeah, I mean, going on that, just on that tip though, like, so I did my degree in Carlisle. Like, literally, if there's an arsehole of nowhere, Carlisle's probably it. Like, it literally, there's nothing going on. Especially 22 years ago, it was like literally old man's pubs, and one of the guys there started putting on club nights, and I just sent him a tape, got a residency. Then I started designing the club flyers for it, and now he's one of my best friends now. He owns actually the largest independent hi-fi store in the UK, and really good friend of mine. But he's done exactly the same. He's mates with every single DJ. He's had everybody play from him, from Garnier to I'm just trying to think. Pretty much anybody has played for him. I think the only 2 who haven't played is Armand Van Helden and Carl Cox. Are the 2 that's still left on his hit list. But he's had everybody else, you know, and it's awesome. It's awesome. Like your friend, it's great to have friends like that.
No, definitely. And I would love to know if And Soda was a song, what song would it be? I've sort of thrown you under a bus there, mate, because I've had time to think about this. But with Hungry, I don't know if you know the song. Oh my God, is it Inspector Norse by Todd?
Yeah, the Todd Turge. Yeah, I know that song.
Yeah, Todd Turge. That to me is like, that epitomises what this podcast is. It's like when you know that when he brings it up, it's like that to me is like that feeling of finding new knowledge and like learning something new. Like that song, it's a fucking unreal song.
I don't know. I'll be dead honest. I haven't actually thought of it in that context. It would be going out though. It would be something to make you want to go out for sure. Because that's what it's about. It's like 4 and sodas, and you're buzzed and ready to go. So it'd definitely be a track that I'll have to come back to that on that one too much on the spot. But yeah, it would be something that just. That's what And Soda is. It's a brand, 4 cans, and you are ready, fresh and clean.
I think it's a really interesting idea for our listeners to think about, because it's songs are connections, really and truly. A song is a 3-minute piece of technology that's a connection, and I think if brands can start thinking like that, it's interesting. Where I want to go now is this rebrand that you've done with us, because I think lots of our listeners can use some of the steps you went through with me, which were extremely helpful to make their brand have a bit of sparkle and va-va-voom. So some of the questions you asked me as we were going through this, I want to ask back to you, because I think it'd be quite interesting. And obviously, viscerally, this will kind of help listeners with their branding and packaging. So We've gone through what is your obsession. It's the toys, music, sneakers, gin, the full shebang. I'd love to know, one of the questions you ask is, what's your superpower of choice? So what is yours, and why did you ask me that question?
I think it's just an interesting one. It gets people thinking, like when you've asking it back to me. If you think about, like, if you watch something like The Boys or something like that, some superpowers can also be a curse, I think, as well as something to be something to be happy about. I actually thought long and hard about it, and I'd say teleportation, because there's always that. I think the one thing that probably you think about problem solving in your life, like when you're stranded at an airport and you think, oh, you've been to a club and all you want to do is get home. I would love to be able to teleport. That would be, I think, out of everything, like, you think about all the other things you could do as a superhero, but just imagine that, like, being able to be out all night and then be in bed, like, within a second. Like, that would be, I think, my ultimate superpower.
Yeah, I think I was quite a greedy bastard. I think I wanted to be able to, like, time travel but also fly at the same time.
Well, teleportation, you could be flying while you're teleporting, but I just love the idea of, like, there's nothing worse when you are, like, dying and you're going away at an airport. Like, I know you've had personal experience of this, but that would be the you pay anything. You always say, don't you, if I could spend $1,000 now, or $3,000 or $10,000 to be home in bed now, I'd be at home now. And I think that would be it. That would be it for me.
And for our listeners who are just, they may not have access to big agency budgets, etc. What are some of the 1 to 3 things they can do to really iron out and start to begin to think of a brand as more of a personality than just a product and a logo on shelf?
I think, if you don't have access to an agency, I think for me, like, there's a lot of agencies who focus on strategy and band it around heavily, and some brands pay, like, hundreds of thousands of pounds to be almost told what they already know, but they want affirmation. So I think it doesn't matter what the questions are you ask. They could be, like, say you just asked about being a superhero. I think ultimately it's just getting down to the core of who you are. Like I said, like, what is your obsession? What do you want to achieve, and what does your brand stand for? Which obviously in your case, mate, you are the brand, because you haven't got, like, an actual physical product. You are the brand. That's why your questions were very personal, but also the ethos analog, our position is building brands with character. So we do ask questions that identify character, because, like you've alluded to as well, like, I do see brands as people, whether sometimes a character might not be like a physical thing like you talked about, like an actual person at Dishoom, but they've definitely got a personality and a persona. So identifying what that is, and also what world do they live in? So identifying, like, the personality of the brand, what world they live in. And I think if you're going to do this, like, do it from a place of honesty and integrity, because people just, like, literally smell through the bullshit in minutes. Like, so once you do that, you honestly answer the question. Those questions, and really trying to find the person in the world. Like, when we're designing projects, like if you take Millie Waste, for example, I think, which for me is one of my favourite jobs Analog's done, because it brings everything. It brings that kind of, like, licensing experience and our FMCG experience, and we created a whole world for them, this universe at the edge of the galaxy, which is what Millie Waste stands for, and that manifested in illustrations and Giphy stickers and a website that moves and beautiful packaging as well. I'm so proud of that job. So again, that was they came to us asking for a facelift on an awesome product photography, and we just went back to them and said, look, we fully believe the brand you want to be, what you're asking to us to achieve, we don't think your packaging delivers that right now. So we were dead honest with them. I could have taken the money, I could have just said, sure, yeah, we'll do that, but I honestly went back to them and said, this is what we believe you need, and they went, okay, cool, let's do it. So
no, it's so interesting in that I think for our listeners, some people say go and look what's out in the market and then create your brand. Now, I'm just literally sort of thinking about this on the spot. Now, I agree you've got to stand out on shelf, but if you really want to get obsessed and passionate about your brand and who you are, you've got to look internally first and ask yourself those questions, and or write the story, like the guy at Dishoom. Write the story of who is this person, who is this brand, and then go out. And now, if I think of some of the best brands, if we look at milk, for dairy oat milk, for example, you've got all the big incumbents with pretty soulless personalities. I don't mean that in a derogatory way. It just doesn't really wet my whistle by any stretch of the imagination. You've then got Minor Figures and then Rude Health. Rude Health is a very, very different personality than Minor Figures. Both have their place, but you can almost imagine them, and I've talked about this ad nauseum on the podcast, imagine them being at dinner party. The way they would approach a dinner party would be very, very different.
Totally.
But they've asked the internal questions, and I think it's really interesting. I do think you've got to go and look and think, okay, do we stand out on shelf? You've got to do that. But I think the first step is actually doing what you did with me, is ask those internal questions.
I think a lot of it as well, like you mentioned before as well, like, you know, it's not going to be an easy journey. It's going to be blood, sweat and tears. It's going to be late nights. It's going to be long weekends. It's going to be hard. It's going to be tough. So if you're going to do that, and you're going to commit to that, do it for something that is in your heart. Don't do it for something you think like might be a good market fit, because you can be quite easily distracted, become bored, become disillusioned with something that just isn't. You don't want to fight for. You've got to want to fight for it, because it's going to take a fight to get it to where you want it to be. Like you said before, there's only so much supermarket shelf space out there. So if you want a brand out there, you know, again, it could be D2C brand, and that's a totally different experience. But still, you're vying for people's pounds in their pockets. You're going to have to fight for it. You're going to have to fight for the pounds. You have to fight for a listen. You have to fight for everything. So fight for something you believe in. You could put your name to.
Yeah, and that's, again, they were talking about, Joe Rogan was talking about this with Rick Rubin, more about artists specifically, but it's like you can either go and try and play what you think people want, which may work short term, but for longevity, you've got to play what your soul wants you to play. Totally. Play to that tune, don't listen to what other people want to do, and then by default, it will kind of come and work your way. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, that's why I could have never been a DJ as a career. Like, I couldn't imagine playing the same box of records. Like, you know, you used to go out and you'd see like some DJs like back then, maybe like Judge Jules would play 3 clubs in one night, and he'd play the same box of records 3 times, like a job. And for me, music isn't that. I could not do that. Like, it was always about finding those records and sharing those moments and experiences, and just playing the same things over and over again. So yeah, it's exactly the same connotations with the music. You've got to play stuff that you want to play.
What are, just again sidestepping into my curiosity here, but what are some of your favourite songs? I've got to drive after this, whack on some bangers.
Oh man, I mean, I love Chromeo. Do you know Chromeo?
No, how do you spell that?
So Chromeo. So Chromeo are like a duo, but it's like very 90s, very kind of 80s, 90s sort of vibe. I'm obsessed with 80s and 90s stuff, but they are current. They make stuff now. They did a track called Night by Night, which is pretty much one of my favourite tunes ever made. I think I wrote down a list of some ideas. I guess in a club, like if it was, if it was like that one more song in a club, like Laurent Garnier, Man with a Red Face. I mean, that's just a belter. Saxophone, yeah. I mean, I walked into a tent at Creamfields and he was playing that live with the saxophone player. I didn't even know he was on. I just literally walked into a tent probably 20 years ago, watched him do it live, and it just totally. I probably wasn't even into techno that much until I saw him do it live, and the guy playing the saxophone just absolutely destroyed me at about 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. So that's always going to be a favourite, even though it's a bit of an obvious one. And there's another song called My Journey into Eternity by Duckwar, which Annie Mac smashed last year, and just that's got the same sort of feeling. It's techno, but it's got a lot of heart to it. And then other stuff. If I'm DJing, there's a track called Hold On To Your Love by the Barrio Brothers, which again is probably 20 years old, but even I played out the other week, and I still play it in my sets, and it sounds so current. I think that's the thing with a lot of good music. You can't tell where it came from. You can't tell what period. Like, you get trends of things happening, but like techno and house music if it's a good track, it's completely timeless.
But that's the same with I'm obsessed with the Beatles. The Beatles are my favourite band of all time. And it's just, you listen to some of their songs and you're just like, what the hell is this? Like, I don't know if you like the Beatles, but they've got a song called A Day in the Life, and they just I'm just like, what the hell is that? And bear in mind, but they were so progressive, way more than their time. Fundamentally, they were the ones. All this meditation stuff, they were the ones who, put that in the zeitgeist by their trip to wherever, India. They were back in the 60s. They were talking about made it okay for men to talk about their feelings, like through their songs. They were so far ahead of their time.
Definitely, and amazing group. I guess I've got one more song as well. I was going to say is if you're driving, like I don't know if you know the song "Someone Somewhere in Summertime" by Simple Minds. I don't know if you know that track.
Mate, I've got those. I've got Barry's bangers written down, son.
Yeah. But that tune, I heard that at Cafe Del Mar like at one point in my life, and it just again, I think it's moments make music, but that track is an absolute. Say it's Simple Minds as well. Most people don't know it, but it's an absolute belter.
Well, it's really interesting because one of the things I wanted to get into the Hungry rebrand is for listeners, every single podcast or every single podcast fundamentally starts with techno. So I wake up, thick coffee, loads of thumping techno. Sit here an hour and a half and just write, boom, 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 boom. But it all starts with this techno, and I don't know. I've got to the stage now where it kind of almost just plunges me into the flow state, or like that ability where you just kind of and that's why I really wanted to kind of have some sort of like nods to that in the branding. So like kind of the orange and the pink, and that kind of feel. And I think I also think learning, school makes learning like sort of so predictable, and like it's like Pizza Express. Do you know what I mean? It's just like what you're getting is boring. Whereas I think learning should be like listening to a great track, or it's that feeling. And I really wanted to put that into Hungry, and I think you guys have done an amazing job with helping me do that. Conscious of your time, son. So just a couple of questions to wrap up. So I've actually got the book here because I'm rereading it at the minute. But there's this book called The Obstacle Is the Way by Ryan Holiday. Really good book. Highly recommend reading it. And I would love to know what has been one seemingly insurmountable obstacle in your career. It doesn't have to be Ansoda. That actually paved the way forward. So I listened. So Ben Branson from Seedlip talked about how he'd fallen out of the window at a 21st birthday party and lost his smell, basically.
Wow.
And he lost his smell for 9 months, and that obstacle paved the way forward because then he had a complete, almost maniacal obsession with smells and botanicals, and that, Seedlip was born.
Amazing. I know we kind of touched upon this already, but I really don't. And maybe I'm fortunate. I can't think of a lot of obstacles. Like I said, probably the biggest change of path for me was going down the role of having a job, working as a designer for somebody else, but having the fire in me to know that probably at some point I would do it for myself, and then getting made redundant. Like literally, that obstacle was at the time, as a 22-year-old is like, your world's crashed down around you, but in the hindsight, that's like you just said about Ben, like, that you come out the other side and you've got a whole new appreciation, and so I can't actually think of another obstacle which was like that. I've kind of always been slow and steady with the rest of it, and kind of sensible.
Fair enough, mate. Yeah, I mean, I think it's I think if you're doing what you said, if you follow your obsession, it kind of you're much easier to bludgeon your way through obstacles if you're doing what you're obsessed with.
Totally, yeah.
Which is interesting. So you've got 2 kids. How old are your kids, mate?
7 and 11. It's funny you should mention about the education stuff, because I'm going through that at the moment. Like my eldest is like slight dyslexia and things like that, and how it manifests is not with the kind of cognitive, the ability to do the work. It's sometimes a bit behavioural. So it's interesting that you talk about how they teach people in schools, because I'm going through that right now, and they basically teach kids to work in a factory, come into school, sit at your desk, do this, have a break at this time, go to lunch, do that, do it our way, or we're not happy. It's such an archaic way of teaching kids. It blows my mind. Like, I want them to be creative, I want them to be street smart, those kind of things. So yeah, they're 7 and 11. So it's so interesting. I mean, my happiest day was when I finished uni and I wasn't having to regurgitate all this bollocks they're telling me to regurgitate and then throw it out. It's like they made me do this quantum maths. I'm so bad at maths. This quantum maths test, and I was just like sat there having to retake it during the summer holidays. I was like, this is so long. And I was like, I finished. I was like, there's a thing called a calculator or Excel. It does it for you. Totally, so simple. It's I
crazy.
do remember having nightmares. I remember having nightmares back in the day where you'd wake up and go like, because I think I had dyslexia as well. I'm pretty 99% sure. I've never been diagnosed, but writing's definitely not my favourite thing to do. And yeah, I used to have nightmares waking up. I had a hand in my dissertation in 3 or 4 years after I'd finished it. Still.
No, so anyway, that sets the scene lovely for the next question. So, what advice would you give to your kids as they're not about to embark out in the world, but as they're growing up in this kind of
different world?
Yeah.
No, I think for me, touched on it before. Don't spare a second for social media. Like, live the experiences for yourself in real time, and like, don't care what other people think about you. Like, and work hard for what you want. And again, I mentioned this before, but like, be street smart, be kind, don't stop dreaming. And ultimately, I'm always here for them for whatever they need.
No, it's wrapped it up nicely, because I'm always here for them for whatever they need. It's kind of like how you've led, the team at Analog. But mate, I've thoroughly enjoyed it. It's so nice and refreshing to have an interview where we talk about other things which kind of filter into what you're doing and the branding and this kind of obsession with toys and ancillary kind of parts of the puzzle, so like Nickelodeon and stuff like that. It's been really interesting and very refreshing, so thank you so much.
It's been amazing. It's been very therapeutic. I've enjoyed the conversation and the good company. Thank you.
No worries, brother. Cheers, mate.
All right, take it
cool.
easy.
So I'm gonna hit stop.